Staring out at 70 empty chairs on my wedding day, the message was painfully clear. My sister's fake nightclub launch mattered more than my vows. My family traded my once-in-a-lifetime moment for cheap champagne and a VIP wristband. They had no idea my unassuming groom was hiding a billion-dollar empire. If you looked at a photo album in the Hayes household, you might assume I didn't exist until I was 14. Every page, every framed picture on the mantelpiece, and every holiday card was dominated by my younger sister, Savannah. My parents, Robert and Patricia Hayes, weren't inherently evil people, but they were deeply, intoxicatingly obsessed with their youngest daughter. Savannah was the pageant queen, the high school cheerleader, the aspiring influencer who treated our modest home in upstate New York like a Hollywood soundstage. I, Clara, was the reliable workhorse. I was 3 years older, possessed brown hair instead of Savannah's bleached blonde, and preferred reading over recording makeup tutorials. My achievements were acknowledged with a distracted nod, while Savannah's mere existence was cause for a parade. A defining memory of my childhood was the day of my high school graduation. I had graduated third in my class. Instead of a celebration dinner for me, my parents used that exact evening to host a lavish, Sweet 16 countdown party for Savannah, complete with a hired DJ in our backyard. When I asked my mother why we couldn't do it the next day, she sighed, adjusted her pearl necklace, and said, "Clara, please don't be selfish. You already got to walk across the stage today. Savannah needs her moment too." That was the blueprint of my life. I learned early on that if I wanted anything peace, success, or love, I had to find it entirely outside the orbit of the Hayes family. I paid my own way through Boston University by working double shifts at a local diner and taking out staggering student loans. Savannah, meanwhile, took a gap year to find herself, which translated to our parents remortgaging their house to fund her luxurious backpacking trip across Europe. It was during my junior year in Boston that I met Declan Reed. Declan was the antithesis of everything my family valued. He didn't wear flashy designer logos, he didn't boast about his accomplishments, and he drove a sputtering 10-year-old Volvo station wagon. We met in a campus library during a torrential downpour when he offered me his umbrella. He had warm hazel eyes, an easy smile, and a quiet confidence that immediately put me at ease. He told me he worked in property management and was studying business. I fell in love with him because he was the first person in my life who actually saw me. He remembered my coffee order, asked about my day, and genuinely listened to the answer, and never once made me feel like I was taking up too much space. We dated for 5 years, building a quiet, deeply happy life together. I worked as a pediatric occupational therapist, and Declan continued his work in property management, often taking long phone calls at odd hours, but always making time for us. I knew he was financially stable, but I had no idea about the reality of his background. Whenever I asked about his family, he simply said they were in the hospitality business out in California and preferred to keep a low profile. Given my own toxic family dynamics, I happily respected his privacy. When Declan proposed to me on a snowy Tuesday evening in our cramped apartment, slipping a delicate, vintage sapphire ring onto my finger, it was the happiest moment of my life. We didn't want a massive, flashy wedding. We envisioned something intimate, romantic, and grounded. We selected October 12th for our wedding date. We booked the Whispering Pines Conservatory, a stunning, glass-enclosed botanical garden 2 hours outside of my hometown. It was reasonably priced, undeniably beautiful, and most importantly, it was ours. I did the dutiful daughter thing. I drove home to tell my parents in person. I brought a beautiful binder with the date, the venue, and the color schemes. We sat at the dining room table, and for about 5 minutes, my mother actually seemed interested. October 12th, my mother mused, writing it down on her floral calendar. "Well, it's a bit rustic, Clara, but if that's what you and Declan can afford, we will make it work." "It's going to be beautiful, Mom," I said, ignoring the backhanded compliment. Right on cue, Savannah burst through the front door. She was clutching a bedazzled clipboard and a bottle of expensive champagne. She had recently abandoned her third attempt at college to become a lifestyle entrepreneur, a venture entirely funded by my father's dwindling retirement account. "Pop the bubbly, fam!" Savannah shrieked, slamming the bottle onto the table, nearly knocking over my wedding binder. "I did it! I secured an investor for my luxury skincare line, Savannah Glow. We are launching, and it's going to be the event of the century." My parents immediately erupted into cheers, abandoning my wedding swatches to fawn over Savannah. I sat there, a forced smile plastered on my face, waiting for the fanfare to die down. "That's great, Savannah," I said softly. "When is the launch?" Savannah's eyes gleamed with a predatory excitement. "I've booked a massive yacht and a rooftop club in South Beach, Miami. It's going to be a 3-day weekend extravaganza. A-list influencers, bottomless caviar, the works. And it's happening on the absolute perfect weekend to capture the fall transition market." She paused for dramatic effect. October 12th. The air left my lungs. The room went dead silent. I looked at my mother's calendar, where she had literally just written Clara's wedding on that exact date. "Savannah," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "That's my wedding day. I just told Mom and Dad. The deposits are paid." Savannah blinked, her bottom lip jutting out into a practiced pout. "Oh, Clara! Seriously? You picked October 12th? But my astrologer specifically said that is the most auspicious date for a business launch. I can't change it. My investor, Bryce, already sent out the save the dates to the VIPs. I sent out my save the dates a month ago," I fired back, my temper finally flaring. "To this family." My father cleared his throat, looking everywhere but at me. "Now, Clara, let's not get hysterical. Your sister has a lot riding on this. This is her career. You and Declan are just having a little garden party. Surely the venue can bump you to November?" I stared at the three of them, a chilling realization washing over me. They weren't going to ask her to change it. They were going to demand that I sacrifice my wedding day for a skincare launch party. The weeks that followed that dining room confrontation were a masterclass in emotional manipulation. I categorically refused to move my wedding date. Whispering Pines was fully booked for the next 2 years. If we moved it, we would lose our non-refundable deposits and have to start from scratch. More importantly, I was finally done compromising. For 28 years, I had shrunk myself so Savannah could shine. Not this time. Not on the day I married the man I loved. When I held my ground, the Hayes family propaganda machine went into overdrive. My mother called me daily, her tone dripping with passive-aggressive disappointment. "Clara, you are tearing this family apart." My mother wept over the phone one Tuesday evening. "Savannah is crying herself to sleep because her sister won't support her business venture. Uncle Gary and Aunt Susan have already bought their flights to Miami. You are making everyone choose, and it's terribly unfair of you." "I am not making anyone choose, Mom," I yelled, finally snapping. "I set my date first. Savannah chose this date on purpose because she cannot stand not being the center of attention for one single weekend. If Uncle Gary wants to go to a fake launch party instead of his niece's wedding, that's his prerogative." "It is not a fake party," my mother hissed. "It is a luxury brand launch. Savannah has celebrities coming. You are just jealous because your little fiancé works in building maintenance and you can't afford a real celebration." I hung up the phone. I collapsed onto my living room floor and sobbed until I couldn't breathe. Declan found me there an hour later. He didn't ask questions. He just sat on the floor, pulled me into his chest, and let me ruin his shirt with my tears. When I finally explained the depths of my family's betrayal, a dark, cold anger flashed in Declan's eyes, an expression I had never seen on his normally gentle face. He didn't yell, he just stroked my hair and said, "Okay, let them go to Miami. We don't need them, Clara. My family will be there. We will be there. That's all that matters." I didn't realize how literally I would have to take his words. Savannah didn't just plan a party, she waged a campaign. She promised all of our extended family cousins, aunts, uncles, even my childhood neighbors free flights to Miami, comped hotel rooms, and a chance to mingle with famous athletes and reality TV stars. She used my parents' money to bribe our family away from my wedding. By the first week of October, the RSVP cards for my side of the aisle were devastatingly clear. Declines with regrets. Declines with regrets. Attending Savannah's launch in Miami. Out of the 75 relatives I had invited, exactly 3 RSVP'd. Yes, my best friend, Sarah Jenkins, my fiercely independent Aunt Beatrice, who had always despised my parents' favoritism, and my former college roommate. Even knowing it was coming, the morning of October 12th was a bitter pill to swallow. I sat in the bridal suite of the Whispering Pines Conservatory, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I wore a simple, elegant lace gown. My hair was swept up in a loose chignon. I looked like a bride, but I felt like an orphan. Sarah squeezed my hand. "You look breathtaking, Clara. Don't think about them. Today is about you and Declan." "I know," I whispered, fighting back tears so I wouldn't ruin my makeup. I can't believe they actually didn't come. My own father isn't here to walk me down the aisle." A knock on the door interrupted us. He was a tall, imposing man with silver hair and a sharp, tailored suit that whispered quiet wealth. Despite his intimidating presence, he had always treated me with profound warmth. "Clara, my dear," Thomas said, stepping into the room. He took one look at my tear-streaked face, and his expression softened into deep empathy. "Declan told me about the situation with your family. I know I am not the man you imagined walking you down this aisle, but it would be the honor of my life to give away the woman who makes my son so incredibly happy." A fresh wave of tears hit me, but this time, they were tears of immense relief. I took his offered arm. "Thank you, Thomas." As the heavy wooden doors of the conservatory opened, the string quartet began to play. I walked out into the lush, green sanctuary, the afternoon sun filtering through the glass ceiling. Then, I looked at the seating arrangement. The right side of the aisle, Declan's side, was packed, nearly 100 people, elegantly dressed, smiling warmly at me. The left side of the aisle, my side, was a sea of empty wooden chairs. Only the front row held Sarah, her husband, and Aunt Beatrice. 70 empty seats sat behind them, a glaring, humiliating monument to my family's abandonment. For a split second, my knees buckled. The visual was too harsh, too cruel. But then I looked at the end of the aisle. His gaze was an anchor, steady and fiercely loving. He stepped forward, meeting me halfway down the aisle, taking my hand from his father. "You are the only person in this room I see," he whispered. And suddenly, the empty chairs didn't matter. The wedding was flawless. We exchanged our vows under an arch of white orchids. We laughed, we cried, and we danced under the stars. Declan's family embraced me as if I had been one of their own since birth. There were no fake influencers, no dramatic speeches, no performative vanity. It was just pure, unfiltered joy. As we cut our modest 3-tiered cake, my phone buzzed in my purse. I shouldn't have checked it, but a morbid curiosity got the better of me. It was a text from cousin Melissa. It was a photo of Savannah standing on a boat in Miami, wearing a dress that looked more like a rhinestone swimsuit, holding a bottle of vodka. The caption read, "Missing you, Clara. Savannah's party is epic. You should have rescheduled." I stared at the photo. I looked at my sister's manicured, smug face, surrounded by my smiling parents and our extended family. They had actually done it. They had sacrificed my once-in-a-lifetime moment for a fleeting night of free liquor and fake clout. I didn't reply. I turned off my phone, dropped it into my bag, and walked back onto the dance floor, into my husband's arms. I made a silent vow to myself that night. The Hayes family had made their choice. They had drawn the line in the sand, and I was going to make damn sure they stayed on their side of it. I just didn't know yet how spectacularly the universe was preparing to enforce that boundary. Starting with the honeymoon, Declan had kept a complete secret. The morning after our wedding, I woke up in our modest hotel suite feeling lighter than I had in 28 years. The Hayes family anchor had finally been cut. I was Mrs. Clara Reed now, and as I watched my new husband pour coffee in his sweatpants, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. "Pack your bags, Mrs. Reed," Declan said, handing me a steaming mug. "We need to leave for the airport in 2 hours." "You still haven't told me where we're going," I teased, taking a sip. I packed a swimsuit and a heavy coat just in case. "Are we going to Maine, Florida?" Declan smiled, a mischievous glint in his hazel eyes. He pulled a thick, cream-colored envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to me. "I figured after the hell your family put you through, we needed a bit of an upgrade." I opened the envelope. Inside were 2 boarding passes. I stared at the crimson logo at the top, then at the destination, and finally at the seating class. Emirates First Class, JFK to Milan, connecting to Florence. "Declan," I gasped, the coffee sloshing over the rim of my mug. "First class to Italy? Are you insane?" He walked over, gently taking the mug from my trembling hands, and kissed my forehead. "Clara, there is something I probably should have clarified a bit more thoroughly when we were dating. When I told you my family was in the hospitality business, I wasn't talking about a bed and breakfast." 14 hours later, I was sitting in the back of a sleek, black Mercedes Maybach winding its way through the sun-drenched, rolling hills of the Val d'Orcia in Tuscany. We pulled through the imposing iron gates of the Rosewood Castiglione del Bosco, an ultra-exclusive, 800-year-old estate that catered to royalty and billionaires. As we stepped out of the car, the general manager of the resort, a distinguished Italian man in a bespoke suit, practically sprinted down the cobblestone steps. He didn't ask for a credit card. He didn't ask for a reservation number. He bowed his head slightly. "Mr. Reed, welcome back. It is an absolute honor to host you and your new bride. Your father sends his regards." I stood frozen on the ancient stones, clutching my modest canvas weekender bag. I looked at Declan, who was shaking the manager's hand with the practiced ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Once we were escorted to our private villa, a sprawling, multi-million-dollar stone farmhouse, with its own infinity pool, overlooking the vineyards, and a private chef waiting in the kitchen. Declan finally sat me down and explained the reality of the man I had married. "Reed Hospitality Group," Declan said quietly, holding my hands across the massive oak dining table. "My father founded it 40 years ago. We own luxury hotels, commercial real estate, and private member clubs across 22 countries. When I told you I worked in property management, I meant I managed the European and North American acquisitions portfolio for the board." I stared at him, my mind short-circuiting. "But you drive a 10-year-old Volvo. We live in a third-floor walk-up in Boston. We eat ramen on Tuesdays." "I drive the Volvo because it reminds me of my grandfather," Declan explained, his voice thick with emotion. "And I lived in that apartment because I wanted a normal life. I grew up surrounded by people who only wanted me for my trust fund, Clara. Fake friends, opportunistic girlfriends, sycophants. When I met you in that library, you didn't care about what shoes I was wearing or who my father was. You just loved me. I wanted to be absolutely sure that the woman I married loved the man, not the bank account." Tears pricked my eyes. He wasn't hiding it to deceive me. He was hiding it to protect the purest thing he had ever found. While I was sipping a 2015 Biondi Santi Brunello on a terrace in Italy, the universe was simultaneously unleashing absolute devastation on the beaches of Miami. The illusion of Savannah's empire shattered precisely 24 hours after my wedding. I had kept my phone on airplane mode for the first 2 days of the honeymoon, wanting to disconnect completely. When I finally connected to the villa's Wi-Fi to text my best friend Sarah that we had arrived safely, my screen froze. A barrage of 84 text messages, 14 missed calls, and a string of frantic voicemails from my parents, cousin Melissa, and Aunt Susan flooded my phone. I opened the extended family group chat. It read like a live-action disaster movie. "Cousin Melissa, Saturday, 11 p.m. Savannah? Where are you?" "Aunt Susan, Sunday, 2 a.m. Robert, Patricia, answer your phones. We just got kicked out of the luxury yacht dock." The boat Savannah booked was a public booze cruise, and it got shut down by the Coast Guard for overcrowding. It smells like vomit and cheap beer. Uncle Gary, Sunday, 9 a.m. I want my money back for this flight. This is a joke. Savannah is locked in her hotel room crying, and this Bryce guy's phone is disconnected. I piece together the catastrophe through the panicked texts. Savannah's angel investor, Bryce, was not a venture capitalist. He was a professional con artist she had met at a club in New York. He had convinced Savannah that if she fronted the initial capital for the Miami launch party, he would match it tenfold and introduce her to A-list celebrities. My parents, blinded by their obsession with Savannah's stardom, had drained a massive chunk of their retirement savings and taken out a high-interest home equity loan to give Bryce nearly $80,000 for the venue deposits, the DJ, and the PR marketing. Bryce had pocketed the cash, booked a cheap, unseaworthy party boat under a fake name, forged a VIP list for a nightclub that had never heard of them, and vanished into the Florida night before the party even started. There were no celebrities. There were no influencers. There were just 70 angry members of the Hayes family stranded in South Beach, furious that they had flown across the country for a scam. To make matters worse, the luxury skincare line Savannah Glow had finally arrived at their hotel in cardboard boxes. Cousin Melissa had tried the moisturizer on her arm. 30 minutes later, she sent a picture to the group chat of a violently red, blistering chemical rash. Savannah had bought cheap, expired lotion in bulk from an unverified overseas supplier and slapped her name on it. They had chosen my sister's vanity over my vows, and the universe had rewarded them with a toxic rash and an empty bank account. By Tuesday, my parents were back in upstate New York, humiliated, financially crippled, and dealing with a house full of useless, skin-burning lotion. The extended family was demanding reimbursement for their travel expenses, treating my parents like pariahs. I didn't reply to a single text. I let them sit in the silence of their own making. I spent my days exploring ancient Italian villages with Declan, eating white truffles, and swimming in the heated pool beneath the Tuscan stars. I had completely detached myself from the Hayes family drama, but karma, it seemed, wasn't quite finished. It wanted a public execution. Declan's father, Thomas, was a notoriously private man, but he was also incredibly proud of his son. Without telling us, Thomas had permitted the PR team at Reed Hospitality to release a brief, tasteful announcement of Declan's marriage to the press. On Thursday morning, Town and Country magazine published an exclusive digital feature. The headline read, "Billion-dollar heir Declan Reed weds Clara Hayes in secret, intimate botanical ceremony." The article featured a stunning, high-resolution photograph of Declan and me kissing under the white orchids at the Whispering Pines Conservatory. The prose detailed Declan's position as the heir to the Reed Hospitality Group, casually mentioning the family's $4 billion net worth. It spoke of our refreshingly grounded romance and mentioned that the couple was currently honeymooning at the exclusive Rosewood Castiglione del Bosco in Tuscany. I didn't even know the article existed until Sarah texted me a link with the message, "Holy crap, Clara. Your family is losing their minds on Facebook." I opened the link, read the article, and then, morbidly curious, I checked my mother's Facebook page. It was a bloodbath of social embarrassment. My mother had spent the last 6 months bragging to her country club friends about Savannah's Miami launch event while completely ignoring my wedding. Now, those same friends were sharing the Town and Country article on her timeline, tagging her with thinly veiled, passive-aggressive congratulations. "Patricia, how wonderful. You kept Clara's billionaire husband so quiet. Why on earth were you in Miami with that terrible rash cream when your eldest daughter was marrying into the Reed family?" wrote Mrs. Henderson, the town gossip. The realization must have hit my parents like a freight train. They hadn't just skipped my wedding for a scam. They had completely alienated a son-in-law who possessed the exact kind of staggering, generational wealth and status they had spent their entire lives desperately pretending to have. My phone, which had been relatively quiet for 2 days, suddenly began to vibrate so violently it nearly fell off the Tuscan marble countertop. It was my mother. calling. Then my father. Then Savannah. I let them all go to voicemail. I poured myself an espresso, sat on the terrace overlooking the olive groves, and pressed play on the first message. Clara! Oh, my sweet girl. My mother's voice trilled through the speaker, adopting a sickeningly sweet, frantic tone I hadn't heard since I won a spelling bee in the 3rd grade. Honey, we saw the article. Why didn't you tell us about Declan's family? Oh, we feel just awful about the mix-up with the dates. Miami was a total disaster, just a silly misunderstanding. Your father and I would love to fly out and see you when you get back. Savannah is so eager to meet her new brother-in-law. Maybe he could give her some business advice? Call me back, sweetie. We love you so much. I actually laughed out loud. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. There was no apology for abandoning me. There was no regret for the empty chairs. Just a frantic, desperate pivot to secure access to Declan's money. The next voicemail was from Savannah. She was sobbing. Clara, please pick up. Bryce stole all of Mom and Dad's money. I'm in so much debt. The supplier is threatening to sue me over the rashes. You have to ask Declan to help us. He has so much money, Clara, he could fix this with one phone call. We're family. You can't just leave us like this. I stopped the recording. I looked out at the rolling hills, the sun perfectly painting the sky in strokes of gold and lavender. For the first time in my life, I felt absolutely nothing for them. No guilt, no anger. Just a profound, liberating indifference. They had made their bed in Miami, and now they were going to have to sleep in it, broke and covered in a cheap chemical rash. I picked up my phone and opened the group chat that contained my parents, Savannah, and all the extended family who had skipped my wedding. I typed out a single, final message. I am so incredibly happy with the family that chose to be there on my wedding day. Declan and I are building our life together, and we are completely financially and emotionally separate from the Hayes household. Please do not contact me or my husband for money, favors, or business advice. Any further attempts to reach us will be directed to Declan's legal team. Enjoy the skincare line. I hit send. Then, I blocked my parents. I blocked Savannah. I blocked cousin Melissa, Uncle Gary, and every single relative who had RSVP'd to a lie instead of my life. I walked back into the bedroom, where Declan was pulling on a linen shirt. He looked at me, raising an eyebrow at my smile. Everything okay? He asked. Everything is perfect, I said, tossing my phone into my suitcase and zipping it shut. I just took out the trash. Now, I believe we have a private truffle hunting tour to get to. When Declan and I returned from Tuscany, our transition back to reality was profoundly peaceful, completely insulated by the quiet security his family provided. We packed up our 3rd-floor walk-up in Boston and moved into a beautifully restored, historic brownstone in Beacon Hill that Declan had purchased years ago but kept rented out. It wasn't an ostentatious mega-mansion, but it had a private courtyard, state-of-the-art security, and enough room to build the family I had always dreamed of. While I was busy decorating our new living room and returning to my work at the Harborview Pediatric Therapy Center, the Hayes family's house of cards in upstate New York spectacularly collapsed. The gossip inevitably trickled down to me through my former roommate. My parents, Robert and Patricia, were living a nightmare entirely of their own construction in Saratoga Springs. The high-interest home equity loan they had taken out to fund Savannah's empire and pay the con artist, Bryce, had a devastatingly short repayment window. Without the promised tenfold return on investment, they defaulted. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings on my childhood home by Thanksgiving. But the financial ruin was only half the karma. The social execution was absolute. Aunt Susan and Uncle Gary, furious over being scammed out of their Miami travel expenses, led a family-wide boycott against my parents. Cousin Melissa, whose arm had blistered from Savannah's cheap overseas lotion, actually filed a small claims lawsuit against my sister for her astronomical dermatologist bills. The overseas supplier of the toxic lotion also sued Savannah for breach of contract when she couldn't pay the remaining balance for the thousands of jars sitting in my parents' damp basement. Savannah's lifestyle influencer career died the moment it started. She was forced to get a job as a shift supervisor at a local strip mall tanning salon to start paying off her mounting legal fees. Because I had blocked their numbers and social media accounts, I assumed my final text message in Italy had been the end of it. I underestimated the sheer, desperate entitlement of people who suddenly realize they have lost their golden ticket. On a freezing Tuesday afternoon in early December, I walked out of the Harborview Pediatric Center after a long shift. I was zipping up my coat, looking forward to the dinner Declan was cooking, when a frantic voice pierced the icy wind. Clara, Clara, wait, I froze. Standing by my car in the clinic's parking lot were my mother and Savannah. They looked terrible. My mother's usually immaculate blonde bob was frizzy, and the heavy designer coat she wore looked distinctly out of season. Savannah looked pale, exhausted, and devoid of her usual smug radiance. They had driven 4 hours from Saratoga Springs just to ambush me at my workplace. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice as cold as the Boston air. I didn't step closer. I kept my hand firmly on my car keys. "Oh, Clara, thank God," my mother sobbed, rushing forward and attempting to pull me into a hug. I stepped back, raising my hand to stop her. She blinked, visibly shocked by the physical rejection. "Please, sweetie, you have to talk to us. We've been trying to reach you for weeks. The bank is taking the house. They're foreclosing right after Christmas." Savannah stepped forward, tears pooling in her eyes. It was a practiced look, one she had used to get out of trouble since she was 8 years old. "Clara, I'm being sued. By our own cousin. And the supplier. My life is ruined because of that jerk Bryce." "Declan is not a bank," I stated flatly. "And even if he were, you wouldn't be approved for a loan." My mother's face flushed with a mixture of panic and indignity. "Clara, be reasonable. Declan's family is worth billions. We read the article. He could write a check to save our house and clear Savannah's debts, and he wouldn't even notice the money was gone. We are your family. You cannot just let us end up on the street." "You aren't on the street," I replied, my voice remarkably steady. "You can downsize. Savannah can work. You can do what the rest of the world does when they make a terrible financial mistake. You pay for it." "It was a mistake," Savannah wailed, stomping her foot on the pavement. "We made a mistake. Why are you punishing us for one weekend?" "Because it wasn't just one weekend, Savannah," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "It was 28 years of weekends. And the one day, the single most important day of my life, you couldn't even give me that. You stole our family away to an imaginary VIP party because you couldn't stand the thought of me wearing a white dress for 6 hours. You didn't show up for Clara. So, you absolutely do not get access to Mrs. Reed." My mother gasped, clutching her chest. "How can you be so cruel?" "I'm not cruel, Mom. I'm just finished," I said. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. "And before you think about showing up at my home, you should know that Declan's family attorney, Harrison Sterling, already has a file on this. If you ever come to my workplace again, or if you ever try to contact Declan, Harrison will file a permanent restraining order and a harassment suit so fast it will make your head spin. And unlike Bryce, Harrison actually wins his cases." The mention of high-powered corporate lawyers finally drained the last bit of fight out of them. They realized, in that freezing parking lot, that the daughter they had treated like a doormat was now standing behind an impenetrable fortress. They had no leverage. They had no power. They had nothing. I unlocked my car, got in, and locked the doors. I didn't look back as I pulled out of the parking lot, leaving them standing in the bitter wind next to their aging sedan. When I walked through the door of our brownstone, the smell of roasting garlic and fresh rosemary washed over me. Declan was in the kitchen, wearing a ridiculously expensive cashmere sweater with flour dusted across the front, pouring 2 glasses of wine. He looked up, his hazel eyes lighting up the moment he saw me. "How was your day, Mrs. Reed?" he asked, walking over to kiss my forehead. "Perfect," I smiled, leaning into his warmth, knowing I was exactly where I belonged. Absolutely perfect. Blood doesn't automatically grant you a front row seat to someone's life, especially when they couldn't be bothered to show up for your defining moments. My family gambled my wedding day for a fleeting illusion of status, and they lost everything. I lost the illusion of a family, but I gained a genuine, unbreakable one. Sometimes, the most beautiful chapters of your life begin the exact moment you firmly close the book on toxic people.